Okay, so today we're tackling this really big difference, right?
Hmm.
Between just showing up somewhere and, well, truly signing up. We've looked at quite a bit of research on this.
Hmm.
Why do so many groups meet, week after week, sometimes for years, but they never quite become a real committed community?
Yeah.
So our mission, I guess, in this deep dive is really to pinpoint that critical failure point.
Okay.
Why do some groups just stay stuck in what you might call attendance mode,
Right.
while others manage to build these deep, really resilient bonds?
It often comes down to leadership, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The sources suggest the failure isn't really about scheduling meetings.
No.
It's about focus. Leaders tend to nurture the attendance numbers, how many people were there, instead of zeroing in on the actual level of commitment.
Ah, okay.
And the material we look at is really clear,
Yeah.
that focus. That's the difference between a community that can weather a storm
Yeah.
and one that just kind of fades away quietly when things get tough.
Yeah. So we're not talking about like optimizing seating charts or anything like that.
Definitely not.
We're diving deep into the DNA of belonging, what the sources are calling covenant identity,
That's the term.
which is this shift, right, from just a casual routine gathering
Mm.
into something intentional, interdependent, resilient,
Yeah.
a body of Christ that's fueled by intentional discipleship, not just ticking off calendar boxes.
Exactly. It's a transformation.
Let's maybe start with the language we use, just everyday language.
Yeah.
Think about saying going to church.
Okay.
It immediately kind of sets the community up as a place, right? A venue, or maybe an event you attend,
Yeah.
not a shared life you actually inhabit. And this seems to be the core of that, the club mentality versus the family model idea.
And this is where the sources draw a really sharp line. They contrast a gathering with a covenant reality.
Okay, unpack that a bit. A gathering is.
A gathering is basically the visible part, the
Oh.
external dimension.
Yeah.
It's necessary, you have to meet, but it's not enough. And crucially, it's conditional. You can be physically present, but totally disconnected relationally.
Right. No real skin in the game.
Exactly. Your
Okay.
commitment is low risk. You attend as long as it works for you, fits your schedule, meets your preferences.
But the covenant reality.
That completely transcends that transactional mindset. It's bound by mutual commitment, shared intentional responsibility.
Okay,
The
intentional.
risk is high. Here, commitment means unconditional, sacrificial even. It's the big shift from I go to this organization to I am a living part of this body. It's about who you are, your interdependent identity, not just what event you show up for on a Sunday.
That phrase, unconditional and sacrificial commitment, it sounds, well, incredibly demanding, especially today, right? In our culture that values individual choice and freedom so much.
It is demanding.
Is the research suggesting that maybe true covenant identity is just impossible now?
Not impossible, no,
Yeah.
but definitely difficult because it really does fly in the face of our consumer expectations.
Yeah.
The sources actually spend quite a bit of time taking apart the misconceptions that prop up that club mentality.
Like what?
Well, for instance, seeing the community as a form of entertainment,
Yeah.
where the members are just an audience, spectators,
Yeah.
that immediately just wipes out any need for mutual responsibility, doesn't it?
Right. If you're just watching, you don't owe anything to the performers or the other audience members.
Precisely.
And I suppose that extends even to the formal steps, too. Like the idea that becoming a member is just about filling out paperwork.
Exactly that. Equating membership with, say, signing a card or going through a class, it completely misses the heart of covenant,
Which is.
which is relational fidelity, real commitment. Without that intentional relational engagement and, importantly, the assumption of mutual responsibility, well, that paperwork doesn't mean much. This covenant identity, the sources argue, is actually a kind of competitive edge because it means you have shared risk. You know that when pressure inevitably comes, from outside or even inside, the group is held together by something much, much deeper than just shared preferences.
Okay, that makes sense. Resilience through shared risk.
Yeah.
So if resilience is the payoff, we need to look at the foundation. The research keeps pointing back to the theological anchor, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
God's relationship with his people is described as fundamentally covenantal. Abraham, Moses, the new covenant at the Last Supper.
It's the consistent pattern.
But what's really striking in the material is how that divine sort of vertical commitment immediately seems to spark a horizontal commitment among the people themselves.
Yes, that connection is crucial. Belonging to God is presented as inseparable from belonging to one another.
Okay.
And the gold standard for seeing this lived out practically is that blueprint in Acts chapter 2, the earliest church.
Right.
It was clearly more than just, sharing snacks after the service. It was about forging these profound, genuinely sacrificial bonds.
Yeah, that passage gets talked about a lot, maybe even romanticized sometimes.
Yeah.
But when you look closely, like the sources do, you see this kind of four-pillar structure underpinning their covenant life.
That's right.
Let's break those down because they seem, well, pretty radical compared to how many groups operate today.
Okay, the first pillar was their devotion to the apostles' teaching. The didache.
The teaching.
Yes. This was foundational. It wasn't just about satisfying intellectual curiosity. It was about anchoring their whole corporate identity in shared truth, giving them a common moral and theological compass.
So everyone's navigating by the same map, essentially.
Exactly. When you agree on the core story, you have this immovable reference point to handle conflict or external pressure or whatever comes.
Makes sense. What's next?
The second pillar, and this is maybe the most challenging one for us today, was fellowship.
Koinonia.
Koinonia. We tend to translate that as fellowship, but it sounds like it meant more than just chatting over coffee. Oh, much more. In this context, koinonia meant radical mutual interdependence. Acts 2, verses 44 and 45, famously say they had all things in common and they were selling property and possessions to give to anyone who had need.
Whoa, okay, let's pause there. Because that level of voluntary material sharing,
Yeah.
it's incredibly rare now. How do the sources make sure we understand this wasn't like some kind of enforced socialism?
That's a really important distinction.
Hmm.
The key is voluntary. This wasn't a top-down mandate.
Okay.
It was a relational ethic. It flowed out of their covenant commitment to each other. They basically formalized their mutual responsibility to such a degree that if one member was suffering serious material lack, it was seen as a failure of the entire body.
Wow. So it meant shared economic risk, not just sharing prayer requests.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Shared economic risk, shared vulnerability, deep interdependence.
Okay. That definitely raises the stakes. And it makes the third and fourth pillars maybe even more significant as signs of that covenant.
I think so. The third was the breaking of bread.
Communion, the Lord's Supper.
Yes, but likely more frequent and intimate then. It served as a ritual anchor. It symbolized both remembering Christ's sacrifice, their core unifying event, and also fostered daily intimacy as they shared regular meals together in their homes. It was both theological and deeply relational.
And the fourth.
And finally, prayer. But specifically, corporate and unified prayer. Covenant identity requires this unified dependence on God. They weren't just praying for each other in isolation. They were praying with each other, together.
So Acts 2 gives us this powerful historical snapshot of the practice. How does the research connect that historical commitment to a theological structure for communities today?
Yeah, that's where Paul's analogy in Ephesians 4 really comes into play.
The body of Christ metaphor.
Exactly, describing the church not as an institution, but as a dynamic living organism.
That's a powerful image.
It really is. And the body metaphor forces us to confront our sort of default individualistic settings. Paul stresses absolute interdependence. You're not a customer picking and choosing services. You're an essential part, a ligament, a joint, he says.
Right.
The sources really hammer this point. If any member isolates themselves, or if they neglect to use their spiritual gifts, the entire organism suffers. You simply can't afford spectators in a body.
So it's not just that the spectator misses out.
Yeah.
It's that if I don't use my gift, whatever it is, the person next to me who actually needs that function to thrive, they get weaker.
That's the implication, yes. Spectatorship isn't just passive. The research frames it as a kind of spiritual liability that actually compromises the health of the whole covenant body.
Okay, that's a sobering thought.
It is. And it reframes spiritual gifts, too. They aren't just personal blessings or decorations for your faith journey.
Right.
They are functional tools, given specifically for equipping other members, for fostering corporate maturity, for building up the body in love, as Ephesians 4 puts it.
And love, there isn't just a warm, fuzzy feeling, is it?
No, Paul means love as the active binding tissue. The thing that maintains cohesion even when there are inevitable conflicts, disagreements, differences.
Okay, so we have the biblical blueprint, the theological structure. Let's shift to the really practical side.
Right.
If a group listening to this recognizes, you know what, we're probably functioning more like a gathering than a covenant reality, what are the actual steps? How do you bridge that gap? How do we forge this covenant identity in practice?
Well, it requires a very intentional pivot. You have to move from just letting things happen organically to deliberately forming the community.
Okay, deliberate formation.
Yes. And that means putting practices in place that actually necessitate mutual reliance. The research points to a few key pathways. First, storytelling and shared memory.
Interesting. Why storytelling?
Because communities need to intentionally tell and retell their origin stories. Celebrate shared victories, yes, but also acknowledge and process shared suffering together.
Huh.
This turns belonging from just an abstract idea into living narrative threads that connect people and anchor the identity across time, across generations even.
Okay, makes sense. What else?
Second, and this is often the toughest one for modern groups, structured accountability.
Oof. Yeah, accountability can be a loaded word.
It can be, but here it means moving beyond just the informal, hey, how are you doing, chats.
Right.
It means formalizing mutual responsibility in some way. Often this happens best in small groups or maybe spiritual partnerships where people are explicitly committed to bearing one another's burdens. That's Galatians 6.2.
Bearing burdens.
And you can't really bear someone's burden if you don't know the weight of it, if there's no vulnerability.
Which connects right back to that high-risk commitment we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
Accountability requires vulnerability, and that's the total opposite of the low-risk club mentality where you keep things superficial.
Absolutely. The third pathway is sacrificial service. Tangible acts. Contributing time, talent, treasure, the classic trio. These things solidify identity. When you actually work alongside someone, shoulder to shoulder on a shared mission, you move past just being familiar faces into a kind of fraternity, a real bond.
Service builds connection. Got it. And the last one.
And finally, rituals. Things like baptism, the Lord's Supper, but also maybe commitment ceremonies or milestones. They all serve as these public covenantal signposts.
How so?
They formally reinforce the collective identity. They're moments where individuals publicly step into corporate commitment, often before witnesses, reaffirming the shared story and mutual responsibility.
Okay, storytelling, accountability, service, rituals, those are concrete pathways.
Yeah.
Now, to really grasp the power, maybe even the necessity of this kind of commitment, we need to look at it under pressure.
Right.
The research brought up a really powerful field example, the house church network in Southeast Asia operating under intense persecution.
Yes. This is where covenant shifts from being, a nice theological concept to an actual survival mechanism.
Tell us about that.
They basically realized that informal gatherings were just too fragile for their context. In that high-risk environment, they needed something more robust. So they formalized their covenant.
How?
They adapted it. They added an explicit clause that directly linked relational commitment to having courage under persecution.
Wow.
Their commitment wasn't vague. It was incredibly specific and deeply sacrificial. They formalized practical provisions for what would happen if the worst occurred.
Like what kind of provisions?
Well, they made verbal promises to each other under the very real threat of arrest or worse, things like the practical pledge. If your family is without food because you're in hiding or imprisoned, our family will provide.
That's a serious commitment, tying your family's resources directly to another's safety.
It is. But there was an even deeper level, wasn't there? The sources mentioned something about children.
Yes. That was the ultimate test, really, of their relational fidelity, the pledge regarding children.
What was it?
The promise was formalized. If you are taken, arrested, killed, we will raise your children as our own. Wow. Just wow. That decision, it goes so far beyond convenience or comfort or even just managing personal resources.
It's existential.
Yeah, that's a commitment that fundamentally binds lives together forever, accepting that level of risk for one another.
And the impact. That intentional, formalized, sacrificial commitment. It transformed what could have been a fragmented, fearful gathering into a unified, incredibly resilient church. They developed collective courage because they knew, absolutely knew, they weren't facing the danger alone.
That's incredible.
And the lesson from that extreme situation, which applies even in less intense environments, is this. True covenant identity, the kind that lasts. It emerges in relational fidelity under pressure, not just organizational convenience when things are comfortable.
What a powerful example to really anchor this whole conversation. Okay, so let's try and bring this all back home for you listening. The profound shift we've been digging into is realizing that the community isn't just a place people visit on a schedule.
No.
It's meant to be a way of life that people actually inhabit. And its fundamental DNA, according to the sources, has to be this combination of shared truth, sacrificial fellowship, real koinonia and collective dependence through unified prayer.
And grappling with this really demands that we redefine what success even looks like for a community.
How so?
We have to start measuring our communities more by their spiritual depth and their covenant fidelity, not just by how many people showed up last Sunday.
Depth over numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because covenant, that deep commitment built on shared risk and mutual responsibility, that's the essential ingredient for resilience. It's what helps a community navigate conflict, internal changes, external pressures, because true commitment ultimately transcends personal preference every single time.
So we want to leave you with, I guess, the ultimate question to kind of internalize all of this. Look at the community, the group that you're a part of right now, and ask yourself honestly, is it merely a place people visit? Or is it truly a body that people belong to?
Yeah.
Truly, sacrificially, covenantally? Because the answer to that question, well, it determines pretty much everything about its future.